The abandoned subway tunnel. It started as a simple dare among friends, something they thought would be thrilling but ultimately harmless. In the heart of New York City, hidden beneath the bustling streets, there was an abandoned subway tunnel that few dared to enter. Stories had circulated for decades, rumors of workers disappearing during construction, strange noises echoing at night, and a chilling feeling that something watched from the shadows. Most dismissed these tales as urban legend, but for a group of 4 college students, Mark, Lisa, David, and Rachel, they were irresistible. It was a crisp autumn evening when the group decided to explore the tunnel. They had done some research online and found a partially accessible entrance near a defunct station. Armed with flashlights, cameras, and their phones, they made their way past the rusting gates. The moment they stepped inside, a wave of cold air hit them, carrying a metallic smell that made their stomachs churn. "This is creepy," Lisa whispered, her voice echoing against the concrete walls. David chuckled. "Come on, it's just a tunnel. We'll take a few photos and leave. Relax." But as they moved deeper, the sense of unease intensified. The light from their flashlights bounced off graffiti-covered walls, revealing old posters peeling with age. Occasionally, they heard the distant drip of water, each drop resonating like a gunshot in the cavernous space. About 30 minutes in, Mark stopped abruptly. "Did you hear that?" "What?" Rachel asked, her voice trembling slightly. A low scratching sound, faint but distinct, echoed from deeper in the tunnel. They froze. "It's probably just rats," David said, though his voice lacked conviction. They continued, though the scratching seemed to follow them, always just out of sight. The air grew colder, and the wall seemed to close in. Then, without warning, Rachel screamed. Mark and David spun around. Rachel pointed to a shadow flickering at the edge of her flashlight. It was too large to be a rat. Its movements were jerky, almost unnatural. But before they could focus on it, it vanished. "Let's get out of here," Lisa said, her voice firm now. But as they turned back, the tunnel ahead of them no longer looked familiar. The entrance they had used was nowhere in sight. The wall stretched endlessly, and every turn they took seemed to lead them deeper into darkness. Phones had no signal, and their flashlights flickered sporadically. Time became meaningless. Hours, or maybe it was minutes, passed. The scratching grew louder, now accompanied by whispers, barely audible but unmistakably human. The group clung to each other, panic rising. At one point, David stumbled over something on the floor. He shone his light down and saw a trail of dried blood leading into a side passage. The sight made them all freeze. "We need to follow it. Maybe it leads to someone who can help," Mark suggested, though fear was evident in his voice. "No, that's insane," Lisa yelled. "We don't even know what's down there. This is exactly what the stories warned about." But curiosity, or perhaps sheer desperation, got the better of them. They followed the trail, moving deeper into the labyrinth of tunnels. Every few steps, they felt eyes watching them, though nothing was visible. Eventually, they came to a room, a small chamber off the main tunnel. Inside, rusted subway cars were stacked unnaturally, and old machinery lay scattered. And there, on the wall, was a message scratched into the concrete. "You shouldn't be here." A chill ran down their spines. Then they heard it, a guttural growl from somewhere above, followed by a heavy scraping sound, like metal being dragged across concrete. Their flashlights swung wildly, catching glimpses of movement. Figures, barely visible, retreating just as quickly as they appeared. Panic set in fully. They ran blindly, turning corners at random, hoping to find the exit. The whispers became louder, almost chanting, growing in intensity with each step. Their breathing was ragged, hearts pounding. And then, silence. It was the kind of silence that screamed, pressing into their ears and chest simultaneously. They stopped, listening. For a moment, it seemed they had escaped the presence, whatever it was. Relief flooded them, but it was short-lived. From the shadows, a figure emerged. Tall, emaciated, with hollow eyes that reflected the light of their flashlights. Its mouth opened in a silent scream, and suddenly all four felt paralyzed, unable to move. The air was suffocating, thick with the scent of decay and iron. Rachel screamed, breaking the paralysis for just a second. They all ran again, blindly. Mark's flashlight went out, plunging him into complete darkness. Lisa grabbed his arm, and together they sprinted, guided by David's dim beam. Behind them, the creature or creatures moved with impossible speed. Hours, or maybe it was minutes later, they stumbled into the faint glow of streetlights, the entrance to the abandoned tunnel finally in sight. Gasping and shaking, they emerged into the cold night, the city unaware of what had just occurred below. They never spoke of the incident again. Cameras and phones had nothing. Any evidence had disappeared. But each of them would forever carry the memory, the cold, the whispers, the feeling of eyes following them long after they had left. Some say the tunnel is still there, waiting for the next curious souls. And those who enter rarely return, and if they do, they are never the same.
The house on Hollow Street. Hollow Street had always been quiet. Too quiet, some residents said. The old Victorian houses lining the narrow street were mostly abandoned, their paint peeling, windows boarded, and gardens overrun with weeds. But one house stood out, 17 Hollow Street, a place locals avoided discussing. It had a dark reputation, and police reports dating back decades told of strange disappearances, unexplained screams, and bizarre sightings. Ethan, a freelance journalist interested in paranormal cases, moved to the city for an assignment. When he heard about 17 Hollow Street, he couldn't resist. His editor encouraged him to investigate the story. He was to document whatever he could find, whether proof or rumor. From the moment he approached the house, he felt it watching him. The air around it was thick and stale, carrying a faint metallic scent. The front door was slightly ajar, creaking gently with the wind, or perhaps something else. He stepped inside, flashlight in hand. The floorboards groaned beneath him, and dust swirled in the weak beam. Every corner seemed darker than the last, and shadows moved unnaturally, as though shifting to avoid detection. "I know you're here," a whisper said. Ethan froze. The voice was soft, almost a child's, but it carried a weight that made the hairs on his neck stand up. He spun around. Nothing. Brushing it off as his imagination, he continued, documenting the interior, peeling wallpaper, broken furniture, and photographs of families long gone. In one frame, a figure appeared behind a child, blurred and dark, unrecognizable but unmistakably present. He moved upstairs, each step deliberate, careful not to make a sound. The second floor smelled of mildew and decay. In a room at the far end, he found an old diary. Its pages were yellowed, but the handwriting was clear. "They watch from the walls. They whisper at night. We cannot escape. Hollow Street takes what it wants." Ethan's pulse quickened. He recorded every word with his voice recorder, unaware that faint scratching sounds had started behind him. He turned to see a shadow dart across the hallway, vanishing before his eyes. Suddenly, the front door slammed shut. The sound echoed through the empty halls like a gunshot. He ran to the door, locked. His phone had no signal. The air grew colder, heavy, pressing down on his chest. He realized he was not alone. From the corner of his eye, he saw movement. Dark figures, barely perceptible, lingered in the shadows, their forms flickering like candlelight. They made no noise, but their presence was suffocating. Ethan tried to leave through the back exit, but it too was blocked. by walls that seemed to have grown overnight, or perhaps had always been there, invisible until now. Panic surged. He realized this house had its own rules, its own will. Hours or maybe minutes passed. He could no longer distinguish between reality and hallucination. The shadows whispered in chorus, words in a language he couldn't understand, but he felt the meaning. Leave or join us. Desperate, he found a narrow staircase leading down to the basement. Light barely reached the bottom, but he could make out symbols carved into the walls, words scrawled in red. Those who enter stay forever. A cold hand brushed his shoulder. He spun around. Nothing. Then another hand, firmer this time, grabbed his wrist. He yanked away, stumbling back, and tripped over an old rocking chair, its motions slow and unnatural. Suddenly, a door at the far end of the basement opened, revealing a room illuminated by flickering candlelight. Inside, he saw portraits, hundreds of them, faces of people who had once lived in Hollow Street, frozen in fear, their eyes pleading. At the center, a mirror reflected not Ethan, but a twisted version of himself, eyes hollow, mouth open in a silent scream. He ran back up the stairs, heart pounding. The house seemed to stretch endlessly. Rooms he had passed moments ago were no longer there, replaced by hallways he had never seen. Each corner held new shadows, whispering louder, circling him. Finally, he burst through a window, cutting his hands on the glass. He landed in the overgrown garden outside. The street was empty. The house stood silently, imposing, like it had never moved or breathed. Ethan never returned to Hollow Street, but he couldn't escape the memory. In the dead of night, he swore he could hear whispers, scratching at the walls of his own apartment. He saw shadows flicker in the corners of his eyes, always just out of reach. And sometimes, when he looked in the mirror, he thought he saw a figure behind him, watching, waiting, just like 17 Hollow Street. Some say the house waits for those curious enough to enter. Others believe it collects memories, feeding off fear, ensuring its legacy of terror never fades. Whatever the truth, one fact remains. Hollow Street is not forgiving, and it remembers every visitor who dares cross its threshold.